Hello, everybody. Tonight we have Nick Brokhausen and Jim Hollingsworth. Now, Jim, I've had you on in the past, and if people want to listen to your story about your dad, who was a SOG soldier, and unfortunately he was killed in action. And then also, so tonight it will be Jim and I talking to Nick. And the problem with dealing with elderly people is that sometimes they have tech issues. So hopefully that Nick doesn't hunt me down for that. As I'm up in Canada, he'll have to get past the border. So
fire is our friend.
There you go. So I'm going to ask you one. I like to hear about unusual things, and you're a man of many unusual stories. But in your book, we few, you talk about the yards eating snakes and lizards. Now, these lizards were not your normal lizard, and it said that they could take a nasty chunk out of you. So
yeah, they're water lizards. They're like the same family as the Komodo dragon. In fact, they look like miniature Komodo dragon, like a cross between that and a really fat iguana.
So how big? So how big are we talking?
Oh, they get 3-4 feet long.
Wow.
The big ones are 4 feet long, 4.5 feet long, and they're probably a foot off the ground.
Wow.
From the top of their spine to where their little webby feet are. That the yards would catch them. And then they'd tie them up in the fucking shower. You go in there at night, don't turn the lights on, you'd be taking a shower and you hear this hissing sound coming from right by your feet. And the thing was tied up to the faucet in the corner. Yeah.
Wow. And now also,
and it does not taste like chicken. The only thing that tastes like chicken is chicken.
There you go. And also, I read in your book that they used to give them some kind of herbal, medicine that it wouldn't affect the meat, but it would kind of make them sleepy so they could carry them around. Fresh meat, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's not get into that.
Yeah.
It paralyzes it. You chew it, and your inside of your mouth gets all numb in that. And then they spit it into a ball, and then feed it to them, and make them docile. They
Now, speaking of
that happened on a flight back when we were going back to Da Nang, coming back from the great commando raid training down on Entree. Yeah.
And that was with Maines, right? Larry Maines?
Of course, Laughing Larry would be there.
Yeah.
Him and Festus Hagen, who later got a Medal of Honor when Kansas disappeared, the lieutenant. I like Festus. We call him Festus because he has a big, bushy Sam O'Neill type mustache.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, the last thing I want to ask you about sharp teeth is I also, in your book, it mentioned that, which sounds quite, terrifying, is that the male yards used to file their teeth to a point.
Yeah, well, Sedang do that a lot.
Wow.
There's some of the other tribes in that do it, but the Sedang are noted for it. They're from the Central Highlands.
Right. Wow, that would be scary. So, Jim, do you have a question, which I know has been on your mind, that we both heard Nick talk about it on YouTube, and for you, it has a personal attachment. So, what did you want to ask Nick?
Yeah, sure. So, for those that don't know, Nick does an interview and it's currently on YouTube from the U.S. National Archive, and it's about, topic is mainly about one of his books. And I accidentally stumbled across it one day. It was, one of the recommendations, and you caught me by surprise because you had mentioned Danny Entrican and Tupelo Flash, his code name, and I had never heard the story before. So, like I said, it caught me by surprise. And I was waiting for the time to actually get 5 minutes and talk to you about it. And then when I started talking to Jason, we thought that maybe it'd be great to have you explain that story to us and kind of fill in or expand on it, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Oh, it's my turn?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, that whole thing is hearsay, because I didn't hear it directly from Colonel Howard's lips. Who it was told to me by was Lemuel McLaughlin, and I believe him word for word what he said. He and Howard had the Minimac's hard not to like, and he's supremely competent. So I'm not surprised that him and Howard had a relationship. But anyway, he said that Howard told him that he'd gone, this is after the war, he'd gone back to Vietnam on some kind of gig with maybe the embassy or something like that. Anyway, it was in Saigon. And this Frenchman came up to him. He was a journalist. And he said that an elderly man in the crowd had handed him this note and instructed him to go give it to him. And he opened it up, and what it said was, "Don't forget me, the Tupelo Flash." And that was the only thing on it. Now, the only person that could have been Tupelo Flash is Danny Enterton. That was the nickname. Well, he had a couple of nicknames. Most of them centered around the fact that he had an apple-sized chunk of chewing tobacco in his mouth all the time. But yeah, so that was it. The guy handed him a note, told Howard that it was an elderly Caucasian, and that he handed it to him in the crowd and asked him to please give it to him. So who knows?
So
yeah,
that's things like that pop up. I went back later to Da Nang, and I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll tell you this little footnote after that.
What I was going to ask you is, it really it's very touchy, and either it's on one side of the coin or the other. And I don't want to put you in a spot, but do you think there were guys that were left behind? Because
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's John Kerry and John McCain did everything in their power to kill that issue while they were in the Senate. And it's pitiful what those two guys did to just basically deny the families any sort of closure. They knew we had people that were still in there, and that they hadn't accounted for everybody. I worked a lot with. Did you meet Matthew Krisoff when you were there, Jimmy?
The name sounds familiar.
He has a big handlebar mustache.
Yes,
he was a tank commander, battalion commander during Desert Storm, and he works at the Joint Recovery, where they go find our dead and dig them up and bring them home. He's in charge of a section of that, and they do a lot of work. We did the recovery on Stroline, or tried to do it.
Right.
They contacted me. They wanted me to write down what I remember of where we landed, how far we went, where was the tree, when we followed the trail, what was his equipment, how was it laid out going up the hill, because they were using his equipment as bait to try and draw us into an ambush. So anyway, I do some work with them. Did I lose it somewhere here?
No.
you're good.
It is like, to some people I talk to, it's an absolute no. We didn't leave anybody there. But you guys, you SF guys, especially SOG guys, you would have the finger on the pulse far more than average Joe. You guys are.
We still have 26 missing.
Yeah.
that are not accounted for. You know,
So on
and there's I saw statistics of 1,258 U.S. servicemen that are missing and not accounted for.
wow.
And from Vietnam, and 26 of them are SOG guys.
So on that note, I'll just tell you something that Jim and I are working on a SOG MIA book, and as much information as we can find, we're doing a little bit of a bio on each guy, and any facts out there that we can find, and then we're actually including a map of where they were last seen. So that's the plan.
Is it going to be like in a magazine, like Pucker Factor, or it's going to be a book?
A book, a proper book, and it will only it will,
Cool.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah, it will
God,
only be, yeah.
God bless you. You know, may you have fair winds and following seas on your ass.
Well, I think that I'm privileged to know quite a few families who still have their loved ones who they don't know where they are. And, and hopefully by a new injection of information, it will get a younger, generation.
Well, when they do these dig sites and that, there's very little human remains left because the soil in Vietnam is very, very acidic.
Yeah, no,
they're lucky if they can find some teeth and maybe a large bone, but most of the other stuff is just gone.
Yeah, it's.
When they did this drill line thing, they were kind enough to send me the after action report. So and with the pictures and that, Mac and Cliff Newman went over there to try and find Doc Watson and baby son Lloyd. Yep. It was funded by whomever, I think the same outfit and they got him. Imagine those two loose in the country, and you'll get a good picture of this. They flew into the Ashaw Valley, and they couldn't fly up to the site because where they lost Doc Watson and them was up on one of the high ledges. The Ashaw rises up, goes up 30 feet, makes a 10-foot ledge, goes up 50 feet, makes a 5-foot ledge, all the way to the top of the valley. And they couldn't get the helicopter to the top on the plateau. And where they lost Doc and them was down the cliff, like 5 or 6 terraces below is where the helicopter smashed into the side of the Ashaw.
Wow.
So they had to walk up there, and they never got all the way up there. It was raining, and then the Vietnamese told them, well, there's bandits in this area. We got to leave before nightfall. So they never got to go to the site, but they went to one other site that was over there where the second chopper went down, and they were doing a dig on that, trying to see if they could find the crew chief.
Wow. So Jim, I have a question for you, which will involve Nick. And for the public, I'll give you a little bit of background, and that is that Jim was trying to learn more about his dad, and he placed an ad in a paper, and a mysterious caller who he still doesn't know to this day said, "You may want to go to SOAR," and that was about it. So Jim looked up SOAR, and it was a meeting of all these warriors, SAW, etc. So my question to Jim, which will involve Nick, is when did you first meet Nick, Jim?
I met Nick probably the second SOAR that I went out there. So 2000 was the first one I went out with Robbie Robinson, RT Intruder, right? And the following year, I believe, is the first year, maybe it might have been 2001 or 2002, Nick, that I think I met you. And I met you as, and I can remember the meeting. I'm fuzzy on the date though. You coming in, you might have been with Davidson, Ron Davidson.
Yeah, the varmint.
You might have been with him, and it was just, you were like the popular kid in school, and everybody was kind of just gravitated towards you.
That's because I owe all the money.
And I
Glad
think
to
I think
see
I've
you. Right. Yeah. Oh, you little shit. You got my money?
and I think I said it to you before. It's like, or somebody was like, he was like the most charismatic person in the room, and everybody was just drawn to this human being. And I joked, I'm like, where did you find this human being, and why is he not in jail? That was my first impression. I was just like, oh my god, absolutely blown away.
I
And
I get a lot of that.
I
Oh,
think
somebody
I
was
th
complaining to Eldon one time. You know, what's wrong with fucking Brokhausen? He's crazy. And Eldon looked at him and said, "Yeah, but he's our crazy."
he's that crazy. Yeah, I've heard that statement a few times with a bunch of different
Yeah, I
people.
loved Eldon. He was my. Of course, the same night he threatened to throw me out of a helicopter. We were taking a helicopter tour of Las Vegas. He said, "I got to throw you out of this helicopter to shut you up." Well, I admit I get a little blabby sometimes. Yeah.
And I think Little Mac, and maybe Rick Hendricks at the time, was the people that introduced you to me.
Yeah,
Because I
one kid got me. He says, "Gary, Hollingsworth's son's here." I said, "No shit." He said, "Look over there." And I swear to God, I almost shit my pants. You look so much like your dad. You know, and that was my memory of that meeting, and I couldn't believe how much you looked like your dad. And then over the years, getting to know you, how much you are like your dad.
don't know if that's good or bad, but no,
Well,
it was always it
you're
was
our little
always an
brother.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, you took the place of a little brother. Thank God you're built like a crash dummy. You may need that.
and Jason and I touched that earlier on, in when I spoke to him separately. There was so many of you that just made me feel right at home, and there was that, little brother, little brother. I wish we had known you were around. We didn't know
We
you
call you
existed.
that because we can't remember your name. I hope you realize that. All right.
You know,
And
I,
you're adopted.
and I'm adopted. Yeah, that's true too. I would joke that I have hundreds of different dads. So. But yeah, no, I always did truly feel the love. Even I was on the receiving end of getting my balls broken many, many times, but it was all in good fun, and I truly appreciated it.
Do that in a bar when you walk in. Look around, and everybody kind of looks at you and go, "I feel a lot of love in here."
Jim, was Nick there the night that the saw guy showed you some knife tricks?
Jay Graves. He's always pulling that little fucking thing. Well, the thing is, what Jay didn't tell you, and the God's honest truth, if he was still alive, he'd swear to it too. The guy that should have showed you how to use a knife like that was the guy who taught Jay how to use a knife like that, a guy named Al Kent. And Al Kent, you looked at him, you thought, well, there's a New England school teacher, weighed about 160 pounds, sopping wet, white boy with little wire rim glasses and that blonde hair. When Tech 68 started, the NBA sent an entire platoon to kill him
Jeez.
in the trench. They knew where his house was and that, and he killed all of them but 3 on his, fighting his way to get back to the compound and that. Yeah, Al Kent. He'd pick up a knife and you'd start pissing your pants. Just the way he looked. I mean, he looked like the most docile, harmless person in the world till he put a blade in his hand, and his entire demeanor changed. It's like, oh shit. Yeah,
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and Jay is good with a knife. I'll give him that.
So
and he should know all those moves and that because he dates redheads.
so can you see me, Nick?
Yeah, when I fiddle around with this thing, come on.
Okay,
Here
so
we are. I can see you now.
I found your helmet. Look.
To 1942. Oh yeah.
So many and I think that you have to be one of the most, if not the most colorful individual in all of SOG. And I know I've talked to
Man,
you.
don't be spreading rumors like that.
Well, I mean, wearing the ties and the German helmet, and then I read another story in your book, Operation African Core, which Jim, in that Nick goes into great detail about some of the uniforms that he was wearing, and he customized a Jeep to look like a World War II German Jeep, and everybody.
No, it was the half track.
Oh,
We
it was
took
a
the
half
fucking
track.
half track we stole, and I painted the Africa Corps symbol on the doors on the front. Had it all tan. I mean, it was all tricked out too. And I managed to find a Spanish, um, like a surplus house, whatever. And I ordered a bunch of German helmets, World War II German helmets from them, and they only 4 of them showed up. So I had 4 of the yards dressed up, and that had special, poncho liner jackets made and all that. We went to pick Mac up when he came back off extension leave. And he was dressed up like oh God, it's sick. I mean, the people there needed help.
Where did you buy that tie from? And I will definitely be showing that picture.
No, my mom sent that to me.
Really?
I was going to go to Thailand. I eventually did get there with a guy named Oscar Inkle, a horrible, twisted human being.
So a friend of yours then?
Well, yeah, well, kind of. He's one of those A camp rats. They keep popping up, here and thither and non. Yeah. But that we went down to pick up Mac, and 4 of them had German helmets with these special jackets and that. We rolled up out in front of the airport down there in Da Nang, and everybody snapped to attention. Yeah. I think I ran over something too. I'm pretty sure I did. It felt like a trash can.
Now, here's the question. A lot of people like to know about what guys wore for a watch. And Jim and I are watch freaks, and Jim actually has his father's watches, which is very cool. Did you go for the Rolex watch, or did you have a Seiko 5, or what did you wear for a watch?
Well, most of the time I wore that fucking Timex Army issue OD green fucking watch that they issued, and it kept great time. But Timex keeps better time than Rolex.
Right.
Remember that, and Rolex, I had a Mariner, back when you could buy them for like $300, in Thailand and that. And I had a Seiko issue, Seiko, and I kept it. When I got to Devon's, I did Devon's on the job. Oh, no, Sicily. We jumped in on Sicily at Bragg. And as I was going out the door, it caught and it came off. 3 years later, we make a jump into the same drop zone and that, and I'm rolling up my chute, doing the rigger roll with the, winding the suspension lines, and so it looks like a woman's long pigtail.
Right.
And I looked down, there's something shiny, so I kicked it. It was a Seiko, and it was mine.
Wow.
I kept that watch for God. I think I lost track of it probably 20 years ago. It's probably in one of the 10 in the fucking storage I've been paying for the last 25 years. That's the real jewel. When you find out that I've kicked off, get your ass out to California and cut the lock off that thing. There's not only memories there, there's probably 2,000 indictments inside that footlocker.
Yeah, I think I'd be scared, actually. I think that was
Who was that? Was that Jim?
no, Jason.
Jason. Just
I'll
calm
go.
down, brother. You know how many fucking Mexicans or Canadian sociopaths we had in SOG?
Okay, so that's a great question. Now, the listeners may not know that there were Canadians and other foreign, nationals in SOG. So, are there any guys that you can think of, Nick, that weren't American born?
Oh, there's a fucking ton of them. I mean, there was, both the Clauses,
Right.
uh, and Bingham. Uh, um, I always thought Pappy Wells was from some place sleazy, like Brazil or something like that. But he was just probably a Creole. Uh, um, let's see. Oh yeah, I remember Castillo, but we all thought he was a Cuban. The little shit told us he was a Cuban. Oh yeah, I'm Cuban, right? So I think it was SOAR of 2000 or something like that. He brings his mother and his brother, and his brother is like one square block of muscle with a biker pigtail and all that, tattoos all over him and everything. And his mom's the sweetest woman you ever met in your life. So I'm talking to her, and I said, "Well, what part of Cuba are you from?"
Oh.
She goes, "Cuba." I said, "Yeah, what part of Cuba are you from? You from Havana or over on the coast somewhere?" She goes, "I'm from Mexico."
Oh.
Your son told all of us that he's Cuban. Well, he's a wetback like the rest of us. Oh yeah, hey
He's a
Bobby,
sweetheart.
come here. I want to have a chat with you.
So
Yeah, that was a good one.
wow. So Jim, I know that you wanted to ask Nick about some of his time in Germany in the Eastern European sector. I don't know how much that Nick can talk about that, but didn't you have some questions about that?
I just
Well,
thought your time at Dead A was really really, for me, for it was when I started reading about what you guys were doing. Although I didn't find a ton of stories, but it's fairly vague. I didn't know what you could talk about or what you can't talk about. But if you want to share anything about your time at Dead A.
let me put it this way. I'm 75 years old, and a life sentence isn't much of a deterrent anymore. Excuse me. I got to get a beer here.
Okay.
The thing about the Dead A was a stay behind mission. I mean, plain and simple. It was designed for them to have special forces inside the Soviet envelope if they got drunk on cheap vodka one night and decided to take on the Western Europe. So the Russians build up their forces. They pile through the Fulda Gap in West Germany, where it opens out on the Great Plain, with 40 armored divisions, and start to head for France for breakfast. In the meantime, in Berlin, it's already got a ring around it. So it's basically going in and sorting out who's been naughty and who's been nice. And they'd probably put the police under their central organization, things like that. Some of the government offices would have changed. All the part of Op Plan 34 is a step-by-step phase, what happens when the balloon goes up. And part of that is evacuation of all dependents and Americans that are not connected to the military out of Berlin. And then whatever effort the infantry and the 40th Armor are able to put up against 5 Russian divisions closing into the center of the city, that happens. And then the big roundup begins. And the whole thing was designed so that, we were Germans. By all, we dressed like it. I got my hair cut in the German style. I hated that too because I looked like Woody Woodpecker. And you stayed away from being associated with Americans, but everybody knew who we were. I mean, it was probably the worst kept secret in Berlin was that there were special forces in there. They just never had any idea who exactly we were and how many of us. I think Stan Olchevik, the Colonel O, he had a conversation with a senior KGB general years after the Berlin Wall fell. And he told him, he said, "We thought there were 500 of you. We knew there was a special forces outfit in Berlin woven into, the war plan, but we thought there were 500 of you." And there was only It's a special forces company, basically 85 idiots, plus staff.
So, Nick, you and I have talked about this offline, and it would be interesting for Jim. I know history is not pretty. And so when I bring up this next story, people's eyes might kind of open a bit. You told me, and I don't think you would be uncomfortable about this, that you guys had, when you were in Germany, that you had safe houses, and a lot of the safe houses were owned by former German,
The Nazis.
well,
Spit
okay,
it out.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
there you go,
Yeah.
Nazis, right?
Well, Verein is a term in German for club, association, and you got hunting clubs, you got riding clubs, you got, veterans clubs and that. And those veterans are, in Germany lost the war. They didn't just throw away their history. Those people reintegrated into society, and a lot of them, in the post-war, made a lot of money, and not in the black market either. They were the ones that rebuilt the cities and the towns and the factories, and some of them were aristocrats. They went back to their family holdings and that. And I got to meet all of them. That was the biggest thrill of everything, was being able to float in that society with people that well, this is Freiherr Berthold St. Andre, Baron Berthold St. Andre, who was a member of the Hohenzollern family, and the Graf, the Count for Swabia. I got to meet him. I even went on a fox hunt. It was the plan was that we would be able to slip back into society while they were checking everybody's ID and everything, and accomplish the missions that we had been assigned, which were essentially strategic targets, like the big port facilities and the switch yards over in Potsdam and the East Berlin. Everything in the Russian army moves by rail. You knock out the roundhouse where they switch the engines and cars and everything around. You put that thing out of commission, that rail yard, for at least 6 to 8 months before they can put a new roundhouse in, or find something to, to actually do the same thing in a more complex method, which is what the Russians would do. They start building sidings going everywhere. But, we studied those targets constantly. There were target folders that had information going back to the 50s, so we were fairly confident that about a third of us would survive the first wave when they started looking for people. And with a third of us, we could still be a problem. We couldn't whip them, but we could make their forward operations real difficult because all their logistic lines were fucked.
So as a tie-in, and then I'll ask you this question, and then I'll give it over to Jim so he can be thinking about something else to talk to you or ask you about. Now, speaking of Nazis and the top tier group,
well, not all of them were Nazis. I met a lot of guys that were in the SS, the Waffen SS. There were, one guy owned a castle that belonged, it was his family's, and it was like a resort now, a spa, health spa, quartzsite, because they had mineral springs there.
I guess where I'm going with this is you and I have a love for history, and you were the bodyguard of a very famous soldier. He was actually Hitler's top soldier, and you were a bodyguard to his wife.
Oh yeah.
So
Madame Squarzini.
So can we talk?
And all those fuckers down at Tractel going, take one for the company, Nick. Take one for the company. So yeah, she was interesting.
Can you better that you tell the story of who that gentleman was? So can you do that and just please?
Otto Squarzini was the most famous commando. He was Hitler's commando. He, and he was just look at it. Had a dueling scar down one cheek, and came from the right family, and been an officer in their toughest units and that. He was the one. He was like Charlie Beckwith when he came up with Delta. And well, Scorzini came up with his shock commandos and all that, and he was the one that rescued Mussolini from the mountain redoubt where the Italians had locked him up. They were getting ready to execute him, and he flew in there in gliders and took the mountaintop and rescued Mussolini. Unfortunately, it didn't stick. He ended up getting beaten to death. But Scorzini, after the war, the Allies, I think it was the French wanted to try him for war crimes. And the head of the British commandos testified in his court. He said, if you charge him with war crimes, then you need to charge me, and you need to charge General Gavin in the United States and a dozen other senior commanders, because we did exactly the same thing following orders. And they let him off. They didn't charge him with treason. So him and his wife moved to Spain. And this is after his death. She came to the United States to work with this company I was working for called Tractel. And they, real primitive stuff to you guys now, but they made things like cameras. They could look underneath the car, see if there was a bomb, go up in dead spaces. It was all stuff that we designed for them. So, well, this would be a good idea. Build me this. A video sensor that we called ET, because it's an R&D shop. We put the whole thing inside an old German gas mask container, and you could put it out in the jungle, and it would rubberneck up with the cameras were on the top and had a night vision device and that. So anyway, she comes over. She wants to become an investor, and the guy that owns the company is a guy named Bill Ford, who invented the voice stress analyzer. Basically the thing that replaced the lie detector. And brilliant guy, brilliant. So she's having conversations with them, and the CEO that Bill hired was a ex-CEO for some porcelain company that made fine china. So he must have got this guy on the bargain basement sale for CEOs that year. And he was an Englishman named Lionel. So Ilsa takes a liking to me. They had me babysitting her because I can speak German. So I go pick her up at the airport, treat her like a lady, do everything, get her down for the meeting and everything, and take her out. As I'm going out, Bill handed me a couple $100. He goes, take her to dinner tonight, would you? I said, sure, no problem. So called up my old lady, said, look, I got to do this business thing and that. So I take her out to dinner. By the time she got the second glass of wine in her, she turned into Mittens. She was groping me right there in the booth. So I get back in the next morning and I tell Bill about it. I says, she's a great lady and all that, and I love the connection and all that, but she's a little too friendly. And all those guys are in there. Miller and all them are going, take one for the company, Nick. Take one for the company.
Wow.
See, that's the kind of stuff you have to look forward to, Jim, in the business world.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Nick. Jim, did you have a question for Nick?
How did you wind up getting over into debt A? Was it a volunteer thing, or were you picked?
Punishment. No, I got picked for it. I got selected for it. It was a real prestigious assignment, and it always was, and right up to the end, it still was. Yeah. I was supposed to go to a project in Southeast Asia, and I was going to language school en route for Burmese, and I got out there, and 6 weeks into the course, it was an agency project, I think. The post office is involved somewhere there, and about 6 weeks into the course, they canceled it. So I'm sitting there sweating bullets because the press gangs from the 7th Infantry Division are only like 5 miles away at Fort Ord. So they send them a list of things that get canceled, guys get dropped, and the first thing you know, they're in the 7th Infantry. So I'm sweating that out, and I got orders from my future brother-in-law, Jim Butler, had instituted where they reassigned me to the 10th group, and en route I was supposed to take Hungarian. So that's how I got into the Berlin. Eventually, I spent 4 years at Fort Devens, and my selection came up for E7, and I got Berlin at the same time.
Yeah, that's great. You know, it's funny you mentioned Mr. Butler. I'm a broken record when it comes to it, but I say all of you guys are sweethearts and the most magnificent people that I think I've ever met, right? And Mr. Butler, Jim, was exactly the same. I can't tell you how many countless times he took me to dinner in the Orleans Hotel downstairs in that little Japanese restaurant that was downstairs.
Oh yeah, I mean, Jimmy, and he was smoozing you too. He was setting you up for something. Let me tell you that right here and now.
Well, if he was setting me up,
he still hasn't paid for introducing me to Miss Carol.
Well, you know what? He was just a suave, smart individual, and I was always envious of his gold presidential Rolex that he wore. And I was like, man, someday.
His wife and his daughter wear his gold around to some of these SOA things and that. The two of them sitting down together, they look like a Spanish shipwreck. They got so much gold on. Yeah, but Butler, evil Butler. You ever hear him laugh?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like snicker laugh. Like what was that dog on the cartoons? Oh, he used to snicker.
Snidely Whiplash's sidekick there, right? Yeah, I know.
Was that Jason?
No, that was me. That was Jim.
No, Butler and Mike Taylor had more knowledge about SOGS than anybody that you could run into today. And Troy Gillies up on that list too. They were, Taylor was in 5 different projects, for Christ's sake. He was worse than Captain Rob, the Phoenix Ghost. When Rob quit, all his little people quit the same day. Said, well, they can't run with Captain Rob, they're not running. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, what's funny is one of the things I was
sorry to interrupt you, but this is Captain Rob here. Yeah.
Captain Rob died about 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yes, he did. Sadly,
on a ski lift. It was a perfect death for him. He was an avid skier throughout his life, and that. Fucking Rob. Oh man. Everybody looks at the enlisted, they like Jay Graves and me occasionally, and goes, "Oh, they're a bunch of crazy sons of bitches." Our officers were twisted beyond that. Keith Messenger, he looked like an SS recruiting poster and was evil right down to his bone. Lightning Wunderlich, who had the lightning lope because he got struck by lightning. Jim Butler, a lot of good officers in there. Manus.
Larry,
surprised you could say Manus and officer in the same sentence.
It was funny.
Larry was working at Larry was a Mustang. He was an E7 that got knighted and went to and there's Bud Gibson's had pictures of everybody, but he dug up some pictures from Larry back in the 60s with the box hat and the yellow U.S. Army.
You described Larry
on some A camp.
You described Larry on, I think it was Tilt's podcast, where you first met him, and he threw the gentleman out the door, and he landed in front of you, and you can call me sir, you can call me motherfucking sir, and whatnot. And the first time I met him,
It was
he
exactly
walked.
that, wasn't it?
Yes, it was 100%. I think I was out in my yard, tending to the horses or something like that, and I was listening to the podcast, and I was like cracking up in the middle of the field, and I can see him walking into the hospitality suite. Just out of all of you guys, he was probably the biggest, most square-headed, fit person that you would ever see, and he was
Well, he
just
walks like a
commanded.
badger, like his spine
Oh,
is fused. You know. Let me tell you
yeah,
something,
just
my man. You're the goddamn poster child for PTSD.
yeah. He was
All right.
fantastic.
He came to SOAR one year. He'd gotten into an altercation at his house, which was way out in the country on the big on Hawaii. And his neighbors had complained to him, and then there was an altercation. When the cops came, he was wearing nothing but a real skimpy pair of running pants that are shorts. And when he bent over, a 38 detective special fell out of his crotch. So they had him on a bunch of, they were holding him for investigation and that. And he wasn't supposed to leave the island. And the SOAR convention came up, so Larry slipped out. He called up his parole officers, whatever, told him he was going deep sea fishing, which he was allowed to do. So he goes to the SOAR convention, comes back a week later. He's at the airport, and he's getting his bags, and he looks up, and the parole officer is standing there, and he goes, Larry, I sure hope you got some bait in that bag. His parole officer was named Low Fat.
Wow.
Chinese guy. Yeah. Yeah, I got to call him too. Him and Ramsey talk to each other every once in a while too. Mike Taylor was the glue that held this thing together, and Jimmy was the founder of the SOA. He had card number 001.
Yep, Mr. Butler. Yep.
Yeah.
What's funny?
He's also the bail bondsman for 10 Special Forces too.
And the SOA.
So
we had a lot of fun in the early days. If you'd have come there in like the 80s, late 80s, beginning in the 90s, when it was still, we used to auction off a hooker.
What?
On the last night instead of that ball where I charge your glasses, gentlemen. I propose a toast to the United States Coast Guard. Huzzah. In the old days, we had speakers like G. Gordon Liddy.
Yep.
Showed up, and I charged $400 on his room on a bar bill with Jay Graves. They're down in about a crocodile by now. In those days, it was Sahara, something else. We're down at the bar, and waitress came up. And in those days, I looked a lot like G. Gordon Liddy. My hair was the same, the mustache was the same, and that. And we're drinking, and the waitress goes, I said, we'd like to do our bill because we're going to go back up to the hospitality room. And she said, would you like me to put that on your room, Mr. Liddy? Well, yes, I would.
Well, Ross Perot came to one of the conventions.
The banquet was in a suite, and he got up and he's looking right at me. Goes, when I come out and give this thing, they give me my air tickets and they pay for the hotel, and they they give me a little bit of an honorarium and that, but anything I drink or eat, that I got to pay for. Some son of a bitch last night put $463 on my room, and he's looking right at it wasn't me, somebody else wearing my clothes.
So here's a question. Your newest book, I guess it's not that new. It's been out for a couple of years now. You go into a lot of stories about what you did after the Vietnam War or after you got out of the military. Are there any pivotal stories that you can share from there?
And Jim, you're so lucky Mac and I didn't show up on your doorstep. That was discussed once. Let's go visit Jim.
You're welcome to. I told you the back door is always open.
I know that it's always the back door, isn't it? Nobody wants us coming in the front where the neighbors can see.
Listen, I don't have neighbors where I live, so the next neighbor is a couple miles up the road, so we're good. You can come. You can land your helicopter in my field if you want to.
Helicopter? The only way that two of us would arrive by air is if we were slung from a trebuchet. You know what that is?
Oh, yes, I do. But you know what?
Yeah.
I've been to plenty of conventions, SOA and SFA. I know how resourceful a lot of you guys are, and I know what kind of acquisition skills everybody has. So
It'll be
wouldn't put it
stolen.
past you.
It will be stolen. Yeah. That is the old SOA is different from the new SOA. And they're like Congress. They have a business meeting, they come up with 6 new rules. Until finally, the rule book for the SOA is like volume 18. Now, the Rogers Rules of Order,
Yep.
officers, they love that shit. They get in there. Well, you know who Rogers was? The guy who wrote Rogers Rules of Business of Order. It's used for any MBA course. It's a primary document, just like the Constitution. Do you know who he is?
No. I mean, I know
Rogers.
of him. I don't who he is.
He was a lieutenant, and he was tasked to map the Apache Trail in right after the Civil War, and he mapped the Apache Trail from New Mexico all the way to Texas, all the way into California, and that. And while he was out there mapping, he wrote Rogers Rules of Order. How you put a comma at the end of this sentence, and Mr. Secretary, Plenipotentiary of the Grand Order, all the speeches and that. That's what Rogers Rules of Order is all about. But he was a cavalry officer. No, he was an engineer officer. And he was actually tasked to do a really tedious job, so he wrote a book instead at the same time.
Interesting. Didn't know that.
I got a question.
I get a lot. I get that nervous response from a lot of white people. I didn't know that.
Hey Nick, can I ask you a question? And that is that on one of your interviews, when someone asked about how you make it through combat, and your 2 words were skill and luck. And
well, that's combat in a nutshell.
yeah.
You got to have the skills to survive, and you got to have luck. They got to be there on the same day for you. Anything slips up in that time-space continuum, you're either wounded or dead.
So did you have one event or a couple while you were in SOG that you thought that you would not make it out?
You had a couple, more than a couple. Yeah, it's the nature of the work you're doing. I had some guy write in one time after one of my weaknesses of getting on somebody's podcast. And the guy said, no, it was a book review. He was a retired lieutenant colonel, and he had been surrounded in Fubai. He says, basically, he says, I don't believe anything this guy's saying, because I was surrounded for 30 days in Hue. It was in Hue City, and so it was great. You were surrounded for 30 days. How'd you like to go out every time you got on a helicopter? You knew you were going in, and you were going to be surrounded from the time you got on the ground till they pulled your shot up carcass out of there. Then he said that I threatened him.
Oh.
I never threatened him. I did tell him that he didn't know what the fuck he was talking about.
I'm sure that you've also met people over the years who told you in bars or legions or, veterans halls that they were in special forces and they actually weren't. And
that's where I get my best stuff. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and the phonies have always been around. I mean, it's a pathetic creature.
Yeah.
That has to assume the identity of something else. I mean, it's like a horseshoe crab, or the crabs that grab a shell and
Right.
get underneath it and that. I mean, it's a same concept, But in the old days, you either punched them out or did something to their car, or stole their girlfriend, or something like that. You just got on with it. these guys that go out there and do this for a living. Although I do like Shipley, the guy who hunts down the pony seals.
Yeah.
He's funny. He looks like a master chief, like somebody could hit him in the head with a pipe wrench and it wouldn't even dent.
Now here's a question. When you first came home and your military was over, was it hard for you? Like, did Nick have a normal job, 9 to 5 job, or what did you do when you came home?
You mean when I got out of the army?
Correct.
That's what vagabonds is all about.
Okay.
That's what I did. I had no savings. I had no plan. I just knew that me and the military had come to the parting of our ways, and that there was more out there. I was 34 years old, you know.
Yeah.
At that age, you think you can do anything. You can become Napoleon if you try hard enough. So but the early days were, we were training SWAT teams. We invented the ballistic shield called the body bunker that's used by every SWAT team to this day.
Wow.
Same design. Yeah. And we didn't know anything about business. So we got, schmoozed, blued, and Parkerized all in one movement by people who did understand business. One guy stole the design and opened his own company and became a public company, and another guy stole our whole copyright thing and made a deal with, I think, a loan shark, and there was somebody else involved in it. Yeah.
And did you?
But we didn't know anything about business. It's the one thing they left out of SF. We know how to steal stuff, and how to requisition, the midnight requisition. Excuse me, where we're not all that good about building a business with, accounts payable, taxes. Yeah.
And
So we did a lot of stuff.
Did
a lot
you?
of weird stuff.
Did you ever do any private work, any kind of contract work that took you to different parts?
Who do you think built the fucking contract industry?
Yeah.
There was nothing out there when we got out that. Sorry, I didn't mean to use profanity.
So,
that'll give me more work to do later. There was no the big swingers and security were Wells Fargo and the hell was the name of that other outfit that Rent-A-Cops, and corporate security was handled by retired FBI agents. That was it.
right.
And everything in between, where you had all these guys that were getting out. When we first got out, it was real exciting because the police departments were looking for people how to train SWAT teams. So we
Right.
got a contract with the International Association of Chiefs of Police, where we did SWAT seminars for like 3 years. They'd put it out on the internet, saying that you can take this course and your department pays this much to the association, and these guys will teach you how to rappel and blow in doors and, shooting course and all that. And we did a lot of those.
But you didn't.
And they were fun.
But you didn't.
Working with Common Sniper on the SWAT team was the guy that owned the deer white.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you find
Then
yourself
They
going?
didn't have crap for equipment. And they were just starting to get bulletproof vests.
Wow. Did you ever find yourself going to Africa or to South America?
Yeah. Sorry, I had to drain some of that beer.
Yeah. On that note, Jim, I'm gonna leave you with in the safe hands of Nick. I have to use the men's room. I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, no worries. No worries at all.
He's going to Pete. He's going to Pete. You know that, right?
Yeah, of course
Yeah.
he is.
Oh yeah, there's a spaceship outside, and they want to meet with the leader of the planet. I'll be right back. That's a little thin there, Jason. I'm so glad to see you. On this thing, I can see you, but you can't see me.
No,
Yeah.
that's okay. It's
Yeah.
it was. I was really excited when he invited me to sit in and speak
I
with you.
insisted on it.
Yeah,
I insisted on it. I want my little brother on there.
I appreciate
Yeah,
it. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's so many, there's a handful of people that just make the rounds constantly over and over and over again. But there's so many more of you guys that have such unique stories. And like I told Jason, I said, I spent maybe 10 years going to different SOA, events and SFAs, and I would just sit at the tables and I would just listen. And it would be, from crazy shit that you guys did to Eldon Bajul walking in going, yeah, I'm running Dev Gru and, and CAG and stuff like that. And you're sitting there going, wait a minute, what? And
Oh, yeah. Eldon was our prince. He
yeah,
was our prince. When he passed, an era died. It
it
was
did.
somebody asked him one time, when he had Operation Anaconda, when they were rooting Taliban out of the caves, somebody asked him, "Aren't you frightened about the danger you're putting these young men in?" And he told him, he said, "When they're in as much danger as I was in E5 in Laos, I'll start sweating it."
Yeah. Eldon was a good man.
Yeah.
He
What a way to
he
go. Fucking lawnmower roll over on you.
right, right. That
I
broke my
asked him
heart
one
that
time,
day.
I asked him, I said, "So what are you doing now? You're retired." He goes, "I work for the, what's his wife's name? My wife's landscaping company. She had like 3 acres of yard they had to mow and take care of and that, It's like
Yeah.
we're old wops. We raise our own tomatoes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you live
I
on the farm, right?
I do. I
Hey,
do.
is he
I
still
have.
recording this?
Yep.
Yes, he is.
Oh, he is. Huh? Yeah. He's out there probably communing with moose or something out in the backyard.
I'm
He look,
back. I'm here.
oh, he's back. Oh, oh, what joy.
Jeez.
Yes, we were talking about you.
Oh, I have no doubt. I mean, Jim and I laughed about it, and I said I'm going to have a beer while we're chatting to Nick. Um, I think that's needed, and
I get a lot of that from white people. I think I'll have a beer if I got to talk to you.
well, no, this is. I wanted to get in the same kind of spirit. This is German beer, Haken Pro something another. Yeah, from Munich. I like. I'm a bit of a beer whore, so
It's all
I
that
like.
farm beer, the stuff they sell to tourists.
Yeah, well,
The
it's good,
best beer in Germany.
right?
Like I remember then I had it in my front of my mind, and now it was the best Heigerloch beer, and Heigerloch is where Hitler had his heavy water plant in Germany. He had another one in Norway in Telemark, which
Right.
British commandos blew up. But the Germans had the bomb, just like we did.
Right.
What did they do with it afterward? And all the stuff that the Foo Fighters, that they were the UFOs, that they were. I'm absolutely convinced that Admiral Byrd's journal and his diary is correct. What happened in 1947 when the United States government sent an entire carrier task force to Antarctica, supposedly to destroy any German bases that were there. And they came back, limped into Rio, into Argentina, like a month or 2 months after they'd gone south. Operation High Jump was the name of it. And they showed battle damage on all the ships. It was an aircraft carrier. They had 2 cruisers, a bunch of destroyers, freighters, and they carried airplanes in there and everything. And like 1,300 men on that expedition. And they came back and nothing was ever said about it. They had casualties. Nothing was ever said about it. And according to Byrd, they met an advanced race that objected to their being there, and that some of the aircraft had German markings on it. So who knows? I mean, the Germans they were after the Holy Grail. They were after the Spear of Longinus. They were into all kinds of occult stuff. And they were also, did you ever watch that guy, Bob Lazar?
Yep.
The physicist that said he worked out at Area 51.
Yep.
I watched him the other night, and he said, the first aircraft I worked on out there was actually part of an archaeological discovery. They were digging up some ancient city and found a UFO. So who knows? In my book on Berlin, I relate I saw a UFO when I was on Flintlock, and I made the mistake of reporting it.
And what happened?
Oh, I got the full suit treatment. Got called in the next morning, and first thing Schinkelberger did was smell my breath. Better not have been drinking, Muckahonger. And some people want to ask you about that. So I filled out a report, because part of our duties on Flintlock with Dead A was we kept track of the Soviet mission. They're called Smell-'em cars. Soviet mission liaison, whatever. And they were usually rented cars, Mercedes or whatever, or they were the big ZIL 4-door sedans and that, and they would follow NATO maneuvers in West Germany, just like we were allowed to go follow their maneuvers over in East Germany, to a certain extent. So that's what I thought it was when I first rolled up on it. I thought it was a helicopter until I got out. My car died. And I got out, and there was 2 Bundeswehr guys standing there, and they're going, UFO, UFO, UFO. And I realized there was no sound, no blade slap, no turbine, none of that. It was only about 75 yards away and probably up about 60 feet above the ground. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, they were so advanced, the Germans, and another part of history which younger people don't even acknowledge is NASA with von Braun, with all the scientists and all that. NASA wouldn't be where they are today without those German scientists, right?
The head of science for the Third Reich was a general named, I want to say, Vonneberg or something like that. He was an SS general. There were only 2 long distance Condors in the German inventory that could carry some tonnage and passengers at the same time. And one of those belonged to him. And everything that he did was directed out of Prussia, out of the Wolf Slayer. And they had huge sites over in Poland that are like these big circular, looks like Stonehenge structures made out of concrete, and they had electric cables that like carried a gazillion volts of electricity. And it was supposedly where they had a aircraft they called the Bell, because it was shaped like a bell, that they were testing over there, and supposedly it was an anti-gravity capabilities, all that. And all that shit disappeared when the Third Reich fell. And Argentina went to Argentina. And I'm pretty sure Hitler went to Argentina after the war too. There's a place in Argentina it's a province, and it's all German. Looks like Bavaria.
Yeah, it's a Bavarian city. It's all the architecture and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that guy, Expeditions Unknown, he did a 2-hour special on it at one time. It's interesting,
Brazil, there's a place called Blumenau, and my parents went there. They were traveling, and it's all German speaking. And there's no question that there were a lot of top ranking people. And
Well, remember Trini Lopez, the singer?
I don't.
Mid 60s, he did a skit, and it's called "My Name is Jose Menendez," and only he changed it to "My name is Pedro Rodriguez Schultz.
Oh,
I live in Argentina. Come up to my spot. Oh, I mean my house." Yeah, it was the Odessa Files and all that.
wow. Now, did you, I don't remember. I know I talked to you about your time in Germany with, Spandau prison, which they housed, Rudolf Hess.
Rudolph Hess, yeah.
Yeah, but you didn't, did you see him? Or I don't remember.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we weren't in the prison. The second parish. The guard duty goes from the Russians have it, then the French have it, then the Brits have it, then we have it,
Right.
right? And each one has a guard mount. And the second parish had the guard mount, and we used to play soccer and rugby with them all the time. So they kind of knew who we were, and they helped us out with some things. We had set up a couple of radio relay places in the buildings that used to be part of the prison, but were no longer that way. So I got inside with the guards and that, and he saw him a couple of times in his garden. He had a garden outside. That was his big thing. And he'd write your ass up if he saw something wrong. Complain to the governor of the prison and that. Looney, mad as a March hare. We give you the Sieg Heil salute if he saw you, snap his heels.
Because I had heard that even though that on paper he was a prisoner, that there were tunnels underneath that prison, and as long as he was back by a certain time, they didn't mind. Now, I mean, this is
He didn't get out of there. They kept him in that place. They had him locked up tighter than a psych ward. That the thing about Hess was, or uh, about Hess was the fact that the French and the Russians didn't want to see him released. They were, when in the early '60s, they were pressing that. Come on, he's a crazy old man, and that he's not any harm to anybody in that. Let him out. But the Russians wanted to keep him in there because that allowed them to access West Berlin. They always had a mission there. There was staff there. There was, the guard duty when it was there, and they could hide people in there. Remember, Berlin was a city of spies.
right.
So any way they could infiltrate somebody in there, they'd do it. And then and everybody's watching everybody else except the Israelis because they don't want to pay retail. It, Spandau was an interesting place. It was built by Prussian or French prisoners of war during the Franco-Prussian War.
Wow.
The inside walls were painted up to about 12 feet with white, like foxfire,
Right.
mixed in with white paint, so it was luminescent and light at night because they didn't have spotlights. So it was just, if you got against that white background, they could see your shadow.
See,
This is spooky, but there's two ghosts there.
I don't doubt that.
There was one's dressed as a dragoon, and the other one was dressed, I think, as a hussar. One of them haunts the courtyard and the inner part of the prison, and the other one's actually up in the cell blocks. They spend their time scaring the shit out of people.
See, this is why, like
I wanted that job.
I really enjoy talking to you about the Vietnam stuff, but there's so much more to you than that part of your life. And it's so neat for me to be able to talk to you off air and on the phone at times about, historical events, because you really do enjoy that.
But you got to remember, I'm a notorious liar too.
Well, I was
Keep
warned. Yes, yes.
You never know whether I'm telling you the truth or whether I'm just using you for entertainment.
So I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'll hand it over to Jim, and then we're going to be at an hour and a half, so then we'll cut it off. Now, Monkey Mountain is a place where you guys used to train. Now, could you tell the public about what animal lives there that is capable of throwing both rocks at you and sticks at you and would track you, I guess, at times? So could you tell people a little bit about that?
Well, they call them rock apes, and I've seen on Bigfoot, these channels and that they got them listed as some kind of Bigfoot. They're not. They're at the most, the big males could probably get to be 150, 160 pounds. And they're gibbons. The actual classification is they're gibbons. And the yards love them. They're really tasty. Put a little hot sauce on it, we're ready to go. That kind of thing. So we used to go out there and we'd use them. There's troops of them. They're, like just like baboons. They get in a troop. There's 20, 30, 40 of them in a troop. And the peninsula, which Monkey Mountain is part of, the big mountain that goes right down to the sea. And it's a peninsula that juts out from the shore, the main shore of Da Nang. And the northern side of it faces into the basin where the anchorage, where they anchor ships and that. And the southern side faces south towards where CCN and the big hospital and all those places were right there on the beach. So it's covered with forest, triple canopy, double canopy, single canopy, all the way right down to the seashore and that. And these monkeys, gibbons, live there. That's their natural habitat. It's the only place they find them. It's right there and over towards the Laotian Plateau. There's some over there, but they're actually gibbons. They're not apes, so to speak. And they got red fur, white fur, black fur, and tufts. Like their chest will be like a kind of a same color as a fox, with some white striping along the edge, and then black tufts and that. And same with their faces. They got rings of hair of different colors that show off their face. And they're mean as a snake. They're like baboons. Baboons will pile up rocks in their neighbor, they're like an area where I used to live in Mombasa, or up north from Mombasa, and then we had this Indian guy that drove a Volvo station wagon. He'd have to take that road to Mombasa to pick up groceries and stuff, and the baboons would wait along the side of the road with rocks, piles of rocks, until his car came along, and then they'd throw him at his car. The bad baboons on the road to Mombasa.
That's your next book.
No. I'll leave him out. He had an embarrassing end. Became a Democrat.
Oh. So Jim,
that was a joke, Jim. You're allowed to laugh.
Did you have a question for Jim?
Have I got a question?
Sorry. It's this German beer. Jim, did you have a question for Nick?
Yeah, you've had such a I don't know, broad spectrum of a career, right? From SF
career
to
we're going to call it a career.
Yeah, we are
generous.
This sentence, or however you want to describe it. Who do you think was your biggest impact on your career, or over the years?
My life?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a tough one. Jay Graves, definitely up there. I got a whole mess of them that were. Russ Krachak, who was my team sergeant in Berlin. I'd like to thank my family. Little rotten shits. I had a lot of Eldon. Eldon was a big influence in my life for a while there. It's that band of brothers that exists to this very day. Yeah. You can always count on them to help whatever you're doing, or just to listen what you're doing and tell you just how crazy you are. No, I wouldn't do that shit. No, there's a redhead involved. I'll do it.
It's funny. In your National Archives talk, you had a statement that said, "The most incredible people I've ever met, I treasure them deeply." And that rung so true to me, just based on my experiences from the very first time I stepped into the hospitality suite and I met individuals, and then over the next 20 24 years this year, right?
Wow.
It's been unreal. And the most incredible people I've ever met, hands down, the most alpha male people that I've ever met, hands down. The most sarcastic and mean and crazy mothers that you've ever met in your life as well.
Good thing you
And
added that
but
in there. People are starting to like us.
I treasure each one of you
We treasure you too,
deeply.
little brother. You know,
Well, I appreciate that.
you pass that on. I'd see that kid of yours, some kind of hockey thug.
Yeah, my daughter.
Yeah.
My son's a lacrosse player, and my daughter is a multi-sport NCAA athlete. And I'm super proud of
I
her.
played golf with Gretzky.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I used to be in business with a guy named Peter Pocklington, Peter Puck. He owned the Oilers from Edmonton,
Edmonton.
the
Yeah.
hockey team. This ought to
Yep.
ring a bell with Jason. He'll wake up here in a minute.
Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter Puck. We were in the gold mining business together. And through him,
Of course
I met
you were.
Gretzky. He's the one that sold Gretzky. And Peter is a former Ford dealer. That ought to give you an idea what kind of scoundrel you're dealing with. Yeah. First thing he does when he gets money is lawyer up. Yeah, but I met Gretzky, but we kind of played golf with him one day.
That's awesome.
Nice guy. Wayne was he's a real talent. Sounds like that one of yours has got some talent too.
She does. I don't know where
How
she
much
gets
time
it.
she got in the penalty box?
This year she only has one penalty.
Uh,
Goalies typically don't get penalties.
oh yeah, well, if she got that's why it's so special when they do.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. She channels her grandfather, I think, because that's his tenacity.
Yeah. My kid took hockey when in California, and the Ducks were the ones that supported his team, his league, and that. And I remember the first time I went to one of his games and that, and my ex-wife was standing there. I said, "Where's Nicholas?" She goes, "Where do you think?" So I have no idea. He's in the penalty box. That comes from your side of the family. Oh,
That's
really?
my boy. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. You get laid? Yeah.
Well,
Too bad,
Nick,
I had dug out my Vietnamese straw hat that I was going to wear during this interview. Of course, that's probably why the phone didn't work.
well, I think tonight has gone quite well with the three of us, and I've really enjoyed it.
Anytime, brother. Anytime.
And I've got to know Jim over the last probably 6 months, and I really enjoy talking to Jim.
Well, I wish you guys luck on this book. That sounds like it's worthy of doing.
Yeah, and I don't ever want to turn these interviews into a promo for me. That's not what it's about. But I'm writing like 4 books, some more pucker factor books, and this one with Jim. But this one I really want to, finish off in the next couple of months and get it out there. It's really important for me that while you guys are still alive and while their children are still alive, and also with Jim and I are about the same age. And so it's, if he and I have a laugh about something, it's
You're both 12?
What's that?
You're both 12?
Yeah, mentally, yeah. But
how old? I think the first time I met you were what, 20 or something?
I'm 53 right now, so
Wow.
just about 30.
Wow. Well, you look real young, just like me.
we can't
go to a party tomorrow for a Super Bowl, which I could care less about. American football, NFL, I quit watching them. When they went down on one knee and the idiots started going, "It's racist." I just said, no more of that shit. But it's the guys that's throwing it, and most of the guests are all Hollywood stuntmen and their dates.
Come
This
on, come on, Nick.
what
You got to tell.
what could go wrong?
You got to tell the truth that you just want to watch it because of Taylor Swift. Come on.
No, I don't go along with all that stuff. I mean, I met a lot. I went to a wedding in Mexico one time, and it was my padrino, my godfather in Mexico. He died. He passed away 2 years ago. He was the senior partner in the most prestigious law firm in Mexico.
Wow.
He represents the Hispanic community, the Lebanese community, the Sephardic Jewish community. Is the Bank of Mexico was one of his clients, and that he was a 1934 featherweight boxing champion from Mexico that went to the Olympics.
Wow.
Yeah. So I lost my thread there for a minute. Well, anyway, the Mexico's a magic place, and it's having the advantage to go and travel to places like that. I really did. I lost my thread there. I was telling you something, and I completely got off track.
You know what? On I think my second interview, I was talking to a guy, and I went blank, and I thought I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't know anything about the conversation or about the flow or anything. And luckily that the guy who I was talking to could see the fear in my eyes and started, oh yeah, about that time, thank God. And those seconds, even though it was milliseconds, it felt like hours. So yeah, I know how you feel.
I usually have that experience when the guy I'm talking to, the conversation starts with, "Well, Your Honor."
Wow. Yeah. So maybe in the future, can we do this again? And then we can see your pretty face.
Yeah. I hope I can solve this problem with the video and that. I'm supposed to give Bud an interview too sometime this month. I've gotten to the point where I just, I don't want to do too many of them, but
Yeah.
I've promised people in the past. I was really, really interested in getting this in with you, and of course, to have Jim along.
Yeah.
And this way, he can go back to his wife and go, "Yeah, it's a good thing he lives on the other coast."
So why don't we end it for today? That's an hour and 23 minutes, which is I think a perfect time. And then maybe in a month or two, then we can talk some more about your books and what Nick is doing today.
I don't know how busy I'm going to get. Miller's trying to get this thing with the production company to maybe do a serial, a series on Vagabond. If that works out, great.
Cool.
And I've got some interest again from the mining sector to maybe do some stuff for them. But
that's great.
That's awesome.
I should be around. And Jim, I'm always available to you.
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm interested to find out about how you're raising those ducks.
Ducks, cows, chickens, pigs.
Oh yeah, get all that stuff, man. Yeah, I grew up on a farm. I can actually tell the difference of chicken shit, duck shit, cow shit, horse shit, pig shit in my bare feet with just 2 toes. I can tell you. I almost. No, that's a Guernsey cow, and she weighs about 600 pounds. Yeah.
On that
Love
note,
talking to you guys.
On that note, I will just hang on, guys. I'm just going to end the actual interview now. So thank you. Don't go anywhere. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Nick. And hopefully in the near future we can do this again. So
yeah, let's try and do it.